And if you want to pull data or push data onwards to your event hub, that is also pretty easy. So first of all, for those who haven't worked with event hubs in Azure before, when you create an event hub from the portal, what you will get is a namespace. And the namespace is just the holder for all your event hubs. So you have to remember, after you created the namespace, to go in to an event hub and create one. And since this is just a demo environment, I only have 2 partitions and 1 consumer group. And your partitions is your throughput. So if you're expecting a high throughput, or you're not sure how high throughput you will get, do not go for the default, which is 2. Make at least 4, probably, preferably 6 or 7 or 8, because again, that's your throughput, that's your bottleneck. If you have too many messages pushing through fewer partitions, you will have slow response time. So when I've created that event hub, I can go back again to my IoT hub, and you have something here called message routing. And whenever you deal with edge devices, you will need to have message routing from the device to your IoT hub. So that's always something that you have to have in place. Second of all, if you want to route your messages onwards, you can create another route. For instance, we can create one, if we have the endpoint here. Yes, I've already created it, so you can either add an endpoint. You can see here you have Cosmos DB, that's a preview, event hubs, service bus queues or topics, and directly to Azure Storage. And if you go to event hubs, you will create the name. You can select your namespace, and then your event hub. If you have several namespaces and event hubs in your subscription, it's easy to pick the right one. And then just choose if you want authentication type of key-based or user-assigned identity, depending on the security settings of your tenant. And then just create. And since I've already created this one, we'll cancel it. And when I've then put in data source, enable root, you don't really have to have anything else but true here, and that works. When you're dealing with edge device, or if you have some more complex routing in place, you can type other queries here. But for this one, it's just true, and it works pointing directly to your event hub. So this is the route setting I have in place. And you can test it as well to see that it works. And it matched the query. That's pretty easy. It doesn't really tell you anything on that. And if I go into my event hub, oh, come on. I really like password managers, but for some reason it has decided all the search fields in my Azure portal is passwords. So as you can see here, I started earlier to verify that my demo environment was working, and now it started again, and I got messages coming in. So the next point, of course, and this was done apart from the waiting time. It takes about 5 minutes to create the routing, and to wait for it to spin up and be deployed. Then it takes about a minute for the messages to start pouring through. And that's it. It's basically what I've shown you right now. So it's that simple to get it up and running. I had some issues with my digital twin, so I'm not going to demo that. But digital twin, for those who are not familiar with what that is a digital representation. So the digital twin is a digital representation of your physical space. Basically, it is a graph where you model all the devices that you have, in this case, in a factory, on the factory floor, on all the different pieces of equipment that we have there. And you can stream data from Edge to Event Hub to Digital Twin, and then you can store, and that will give you the state of your devices in real time. And then you can store the history of that data into ADX, or Data Explorer, as your database for historical purposes, to look backward in time to see what's happened. For smaller cases, might not be very interesting. For larger deployments, or if you're working in oil industry or something like that, that kind of a graph technology is really helpful. But what we wanted to talk about was ADX. Azure Data Explorer, how many people here have worked with that? A few, yeah. How many people have worked with log analytics? More people, yeah. So log analytics is running on top of Data Explorer. And you're using a language, when you're querying it, you're using a language called Custo. And just a fun fact, in case you didn't know, the Custo is the guys who made Custo, named it after the French diver, Jacques Cousteau, because you're diving into your data. And ADX is a really, really powerful time series database. So for log analytics, for IoT devices or IoT messaging, it is expensive, but it is also really powerful. It's the best time series database that Microsoft offers. And they've typically had some challenges with time series earlier. I don't know if anybody tried out the Azure time series database, which failed. Oh, it wasn't really good. But ADX works. It's built from the ground up within Microsoft, and they use it for log analytics way before they then started pushing it out for as a specialized solution. You can also find Data Explorer within Synapse if you prefer to stick within the Synapse space, which means that you can also then start combining your data warehouse and relational data with your time series. But to enable ADX to run, of course, you have to have a cluster up and running. It takes a while to deploy it, and after you've deployed it, if you want to start streaming data into it, you need to turn on streaming ingestion on the cluster. So that's the first part you need to do. And you can, of course, scale up and out if you want. Then you need to create a database. It's quite simple. It's just, you can do it manually here. You can run Custo queries to do it. Then on that database, you will need to run a command to enable streaming ingestion on the database. And because it's hidden in the documentation, it took me a while to figure out why if you don't enable it, you will still get data in. It will just have a rather high latency, which can, of course, be an issue. Then I've created my demo table. And understanding what data is coming in from your sensors might be a bit of a challenge, depending on how well the devices are documented. One thing I found is helpful is I actually go and create a stream analytics job, and I connect to the IoT hub or the event hub, and I just sample in the query so I can read in the bottom here what's coming in, so I can see what columns are coming. And then back again, I will create a table and get that table ready. And then I have to go back to my database, and I will go in and connect to the IoT hub. It's a bit funny that even though I've clicked on IoT hub, I still have to filter for it afterwards. And again, this is quite simple one, so I don't have a lot of access policies, and I only have one consumer group. You can add event system properties if you want, so include time, content encoding, and various other information. I'm not interested in that now. And then I'll set the table name. This is JSON formats. For some reason, it doesn't allow me to map the columns today. I'm not sure why. I click Create, and it will take a little bit of time to create that. Of course, I have already, while that is deploying, oh, come on. There we go. Let's go back to... So if I just go to PI demo 2, see if there's any data coming in. Nothing yet. No, but I did connect to the event hub earlier to see. And there is data coming in. The only reason I'm not sure what happened today, probably the demo gods have hit me hard. I don't get message ID, device ID, or event process UTC time for some reason, but I do get the temperatures in. So there might be some offsets on the data types that it doesn't allow or something. I hadn't had time to check it out, but it is quite simple to do. Another thing that I've done when I'm not quite sure on how the format is, I'll see if I had that one running. So what I've done here is, might be a bit hard to see if I can zoom it in a bit, see if we can get that. Yep. So I knew that I had a message ID, I knew I had a message type, publisher ID, and I knew I had a message body. That's where the main payload of the JSON object is. So I just dumped that into a column. I had short time to deliver for the client, so I just thought, okay, I'll do this, and then I'll unwrap the JSON afterwards. And I've done that using a view. Okay, I'll just take top 10 on that. Oh, come on. Surprise, I've already authenticated. Yes. So I've created a function, and the function in ADX is a view, where I've expanded the message column, and then pumped that out. How are we on time? I think I have 1 minute left, so. Yep. So it's really, really simple to get data dumped into ADX, and then you can start developing on that afterwards. So in this case, I had sensor data coming in from a packaging machine, and we wanted to do some explanation to see why we had stops. Okay, we had stops because people were having coffee breaks, stops because of lunch, stops because of packaging, having to change the packaging thing in the machine. And we had to have the personnel on the line go in afterwards and try to explain to us using a web app what the stops meant. So we could try to understand and how to increase efficiency to get them closer to the theoretical max capacity of the machine. So we could then export the data out using a very nice little function in Custo, where you first define your export to an external table. You define a connection to a table in SQL, Azure SQL with a connection string. And then I created, oh, come on, zooming out. I created a continuous export, which is another function in ADX that stops, and I wasn't done, but it starts running for every 2 minutes and pumps data into that SQL table. So ADX is really nicely integrated. There are not a lot of moving parts here, and that makes it a lot more fun to work with IoT projects in Azure these days. Thank you.